First and Now is your official BC Lions podcast. The playoffs. They're here, baby. Matt Baker alongside Nick Kowalski. And we took a bye week ourselves last week, but that's fine because we got a massive, massive buffet, you will. All things Western semifinal here. Lions and Stampeders. Pardon my language. I live for this shit.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm fired up. I told you.
It's the best. We were just saying that today is a sports equinox too. We were recording this on the Monday. So you got NBA, MLB, NHL, NFL. CFL should be included in that.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that'd be ever. I bet it's been done before on like a Saturday or Sunday of the playoffs.
I guarantee it. Yeah.
This upcoming weekend probably. Actually.
World Series happening. Yeah.
Yeah, the real sports equinox. But yeah, it's exciting stuff this week. It's
I suppose the World Series could be over by Saturday. But yeah, you get what we're saying.
Yeah, we'll see. But it's such an exciting week. We're going to BC Place tomorrow for practice for the rest of the week. So that just feels like you're kind of under the big lights now, and it's such a good time.
And that's what makes it feel even a step higher is, we're inside BC Place pretty much for the week. Recording this on the Monday. Tuesday to Friday, be down there. BC Lions on tap for those in the downtown area, broadcasting from the Shark Club on Thursday night. Dwayne Vanneau, our president, will join us that night. Yeah, note the programming note. We're going trick-or-treating Tuesday. Well, someone's going to a Canuck game. Someone else here is going trick-or-treating.
My Preds are in town.
Yeah, we will talk hockey in just a minute. But I love this. And you know what? Being out there on the field today at practice, again, shorter work day, about 45 minutes, a lot of special teams work, a little bit of O&D walkthrough, kind of a glorified walkthrough, but you sense being around this team, Nick, that the switch has been flipped. Doesn't matter that they lost anymore in week 20, 41-16 to the same Stampeders team. Everyone here collectively knows it's a new season. We're all 0-0 now.
I think that's what you have to take away from that Week 20 game back 10 days ago now, which, it does feel like a long time ago. But ultimately, at the time, it still meant something. But, I mean, realistically, Winnipeg just rolled over Edmonton the very next day. So it's not like... I don't think we were sitting here thinking that we were going to win out and get all that help. Like, if you want to be realistic, Winnipeg dropping 2 was not really ever in the cards. So... obviously, Coach Rick Campbell made the decision to tell VA, like, you're going to be the playoff hero. You're not going to be the Week 20 meaningless game hero, right? In a game that we were already down. And at the same time, Dane Evans is proven to be totally capable, something we already knew before this season. So, unfortunate result, obviously. But, I mean, Vernon Adams is just fine. He's coming off an MLP season, 5,000 total yards this season. Probably would have hit 6,000 if he played the full 3 games that he missed with that knee injury.
Easily.
So, I mean, you got to sit back and look at the bigger picture and say, like, how lucky we are to have Vernon healthy and have him ready for playoffs and have him with all these weapons and ready for the real moment this Saturday.
Yeah, and Vernon, I think, even said in his last media scrum prior to that game, the walkthrough here is, we're preparing as if we're playing on November the 4th. I mean, if something does happen, great. But, ultimately, and losing that game to the Bombers here on October the 6th pretty much sealed it, right? I mean, the scenarios were set in front. But, I love how this team responded in Hamilton the next week, trading punches with the Ticats. And I don't know what else you can say about losing to Calgary in the final game there, other than the Stampeders were desperate, and ultimately that ultimately got them in, right? Because they go out and lose their last game, and or they still have ended up in with Saskatchewan ended up 6-12 too. So that got them in, right?
The Riders dropping their last 7 games this year and last year did that to them. So again, BC Lions fans, the Riders went 0-14 post Labor Day these last 2 years, so it could be worse than losing one meaningless game to the Calgary Stampeders.
And I saw a crazy stat about the Ottawa Redblacks. They still have not beaten an East opponent at home since the division final in 2018.
There's a lot of weird stats going around.
That was when Coach Rick was there leading the charge.
Yeah, right? There's a lot of weird, like Montreal going 0-7 versus Winnipeg,
versus
BC,
the cream
and Toronto.
Of the crop.
That's just a lot of weird things.
So believe me, it could be worse. Be worse.
Be happy you have one of, if not the best quarterback in the CFL heading into this postseason.
And how many, this club has not hosted 2 straight years of playoff games since 2011 and 2012, right?
So
that
was there.
Yeah, that was when Wally and Mike Benavides were the crossover head coaches, right? Wally, his first coaching retirement after that 2011 Grey Cup. So, yeah, like we said, it's a buffet, it's a smorgasbord. There's all kinds of great things happening on game day that we'll promote here. We're going to go in. We got a beefy episode today. We're going to talk to Farhan Lalji from TSN. He'll be on the sidelines, get his thoughts on this matchup. Mark Steven, friend of the program. We've had him as recently as, I think, late last season. Voice of the Calgary Stampeders on CHQR Calgary, long-time broadcaster, one of the great people of the CFL media, will stop by here and get a Calgary perspective. But we want to first hit on an eventful weekend for all of us. Well, let's talk about you first. I seen your Instagram story. You're dressing up as a crayon at a Halloween party, and you won something.
I won as a purple crayon. That is a fact. And I did win a prize actually for my costume, which was fun. But yeah, I did want to go to the Canucks game you guys went to. I was trying my best to, but
yes,
my alternative option was to go for Halloween, and I'm not the biggest Halloween guy, to be honest. But I got invited to an event, so I mustered up a costume, went and purchased it actually. And I won $50 for it, so it paid for the costume.
There you go.
There was an actual contest where like the prize was $100, but you had to like go on stage and like show it off kind of thing. I think a Frankenstein won that one, and then I just got randomly like picked out of the crowd, and yeah.
And this was at a. Well, where was this?
It was at like a little studio in Mount Pleasant, really cool area.
Cool.
A friend of a friend was running the event, so I'm happy to support that. And it was a fun night. But your weekend and your night on Friday looked way better than mine. I'll say that.
Well, I can't take credit for all of it because I kind of fell into. Well, I didn't fall into it. I'll explain. So, Vernon Adams Jr., big hockey fan. He became one in Montreal, and he went to some Habs games and did a big jersey exchange with Shea Weber. So Dwayne Vanu, our president, arranged for a few of us to go there Friday night playing St. Louis. And Vernon, being the thoughtful guy that he is, decided to invite the entire O-line. Every offensive lineman was there, whether it was injured list, practice roster, active, everyone. And, good little team bonding experience. So I guess along the way, I sort of thought, well, let's try and get something out of this. So pull some strings, reach out to the Canucks. Excellent job. Thanks to Jad and Craig McEwen and John and everyone involved in the Canucks social media and game ops for the hospitality. So arranged for a second period scoreboard shot, which was a lot of fun. I tried to hide from that shot, but one of my other buddies at the game texted me saying I was on the big screen. So okay,
part of the O-line.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, pretty. Yeah, who would think otherwise, right? Just look at me. Not quite, but you get the picture. So and then have to throw Kate Pedersen into the mix too. Canucks web and arena host, formerly of the CFL's content team as well as the Toronto Argos, for helping make this happen. They asked at one point, do you think Vernon would come do the crowd siren? They do that to pump the crowd up. They whine the thing, and yeah, sure. So Vernon did it, and we arranged a jersey swap with Kirk McLean. It was just a very cool thing to be a part of, and have to thank the Canucks again for all the great hospitality. It was fun.
It looked like a lot of fun, and unsurprisingly, those videos just popped off on social media. A lot of good comments about the Lions and the Canucks working together, right? Which is always good to see in the same sports town city.
Should be doing it more, all of us.
Oh yeah. But Vernon gave that thing a good go. People were saying to take it easy on that throwing shoulder, but Vernon, he'll be fine. But it was that was a really cool video of Vernon with the siren that you got.
I want to say it was up to pretty much, I think I checked on the Sunday, it was over 25,000 views on Instagram. So
good atmosphere there too, like a 5-0 win too, like just perfect, right? You got Chris Schluger with the Quinn Hughes jersey there. I think you influenced that too, right?
Yeah, he was all in. He was asking me advice. What jersey should I get? Vernon is not showing in this picture, but I think he had it over his shoulder on the siren. Yeah, he had. We're watching it here. He's got himself an Elias Pettersson jersey, so
not bad at all.
Yeah, very cool. One of the coolest experiences I've had in this business with this team. So, and yeah, it was a great hockey game too. 5-0 and shorthanded goals, and it was great to see.
Yeah.
And we have to mention, it is a big weekend coming up. Our friends, our roommates, the Vancouver Whitecaps, hosting LAFC in Game 2 of their series. That's win or go home for them as well. They dropped the first one of the best of 3, so a triple header of Vancouver sports going on in downtown, and let's hope we all win. The Canucks playing Dallas at 7 o'clock Saturday night.
Yeah, sweep is definitely in the cards.
All right, you heard it. You guaranteed it.
I said on. In the cards.
In the cards is right. I could see it. Hey, Canucks.
I think the old me would guarantee it. No problem.
Canucks are playing well. Whitecaps are going to have a great crowd too. So they're going to defend their home turf well and force a third game back in LA. So yeah, exciting times. You mentioned at Sports Equinox. Well, locally alone, there's a lot to be excited about. Now, as far as this Lions and Stampeders matchup goes, we're going to talk to Farhan here in just a few minutes, but 2 out of 3 in the regular season. Again, we kind of hit on it in our last episode when we were teeing up the Week 20 game. Lions go in Week 1, CFL's opener, get it done 25-15, convincing win at home in August, a nice recovery from the loss in Winnipeg, which was the week prior. And yeah, we have to acknowledge it didn't necessarily go the Lions' way against a desperate Stampeders squad. I think you throw the records out here, Nick. I know Calgary struggled for most of the year. Calgary's only 6-12 in the regular season, but still have some guys on both sides of the ball that the Lions will have to key in on.
Yeah, a lot of interesting results too this year when you look back to that season opener on June 8th, where it was a 25-15 Lions win. But Kadeem Carey and Peyton Logan both played that game, but they combined for 10 rushes. Jake Maier only throws for 166 yards, and the defense ultimately shuts them down pretty much the entire game, right? The Stampeders also didn't record a sack in that game. And that's,
right.
So that's a big kudos to the offensive line if they can get back to that type of play. And then Mizell goes for 81 yards, over 6 yards a carry in that game. So that's going to be a big key. And then I think another big X factor in this game on Saturday that was an X factor in that season opener is Dominique Grimes. You remember Vernon, and Vernon starts 10 for 10 on that opening drive against Calgary in Week 1 and hits Rhymes for a touchdown. Rhymes scores twice in the first half, and if Rhymes can get 100 yards and 2 scores, you got to like the Lions' chances on Saturday, right? And that's the potential he has, and you just got to be able to unlock him that way.
Yeah, this is big for VA. Only his second playoff start. The only other one was a 2019 Eastern semifinal loss to Edmonton, of all teams. Remember that year where the Elks, or the Eskimos, or they were at the time, crossed over and got a pretty big upset. So that just there goes to show you anything can happen come playoff time. But for me, Nick, this is all about VA. The Lions prevail in this game. We're going to be talking a lot about how well Vernon performed.
100%. And I would say it's encouraging that in those 2 wins over Calgary that he did perform to upwards of his best abilities, right? He had, in that other game in August, he threw for 4 touchdowns. You remember Lucky caught his first one. Keon Hatcher went crazy in that game too, 9 for 170 and a touchdown. Yeah. And I think that's another element of this game. Keon Hatcher didn't play in Week 20. Like the team was cautious. Like if it was a playoff game, you assume Hatcher.
Yeah, it was questionable going in, and they determined after warmups that he wouldn't start. And once that happened, you figure, there's no point here. So yeah, that's why the depth is key with McInnes. But I'd expect number 4 to be unleashed here pretty good.
Yeah, it's not even the depth too, right? Like Keon's arguably like he's the guy. He's like the best guy in this group. You could argue at times, right? Been one of the best receivers in the CFL this year, and you're lucky that you have Alex Hollins and Dominique Grimes and Javon Catoy with a career high in yards too. McInnes at a career high. So, I mean, we've said it all season. The options are aplenty in that receiving core, but we'll also see like Taquan Mizell getting first team reps so far too, right, by running back. So that's another interesting spot to look at. We talk about Calgary's run game, but BC's is going to be important too.
Yeah, Rick was listening in for those who subscribe to Sekeres and Price. Rick Campbell joining Sekeres and Price on their Monday podcast, and he confirmed it to them that they're going to go with Smoke this week, and we shall see. And Yeah, that's definitely an area that's big in this game. I know Mizell had a great start to this season. He's been dealing with a rib injury the last month or so, but he's a guy I think they like in the pass blocking game as well, and I think that is shown through on film. So that's part of it. I know with Farhan and Mark Steven, we'll probably talk a lot about Micah Alway and Cam Judge and what they bring up front. It's going to take a 12-man effort on both sides of the ball here to neutralize a lot of these areas.
Yeah, and even Smoke Mizell, just to tease this out there, he was one of the guys we sat down last week for our preliminary Arrow Up interviews. And just talking with Smoke, we brought up the fact that, hey, like, you're healthy now, and I know the playoffs are coming up. Like, just thoughts about playing playoff football, and he was super excited. He's someone that we talked about, and we've documented this, that he missed a full couple of years of football, right, with several injuries, passport issues, all of that, right. So now he's back playing a playoff game for I think the first time in I think he said over 5 years. So you don't think that he's excited to play, and it's in front of the home crowd to boot too, right? So he's someone that motivation won't be lacking there, and he's gonna, like you said, Cam Judge and Micah Alway, like it's gonna be no easy task, but he's shown in week one that he's capable of breaking through.
Yeah, and that's what the playoffs are all about. It's anyone's game. Anyone can step up, and look at last year, guys like Hatcher and Hollins, we were talking about those guys being their first taste of action, right? So really looking forward to seeing what'll happen here. This Lions defense, we'll talk about it. They know they have to be better. They know they have to get back to the dominance that they had in the first half of the season. And for me, a lot of that starts with Matthew Betts, Sione Tuhema. We're not expecting him to play. He's appealing that one-game suspension, but we've talked about the guys in the interior, the Woody Barons, the Josh Bankses, the Thibaut Debayes, not necessarily showing up on the stat sheet, but contributing, making plays. And that's going to be important because stopping that Calgary run game, again, stop me if you heard this before, that's going to be a major piece of the pie.
Well, 100%. I think if you do get into the element that it is going to be BC loading up the box and daring Calgary to put the ball in Jake Mayer's hand and throw the ball, then suddenly you got a guy like Gary Peters in the corner for, we've said it all year, is probably the best defensive back in the entire CFL. And then on the other side with Jalen Edwards-Cooper's injury, Mike Jones has been filling these last couple of weeks. And I mean, if you remember in 2019, Mike Jones busts onto the scene in Winnipeg during their playoff run, becomes kind of an unsung hero for the Bombers throughout their first Grey Cup there, shutting down Brandon Banks in the Grey Cup and all of that. And then last year he had 2 picks in the East semifinal for the Alouettes on Dane Evans. So Mikey J is someone who's definitely shown an ability to rise up when the moment comes in the postseason. And if we do see BC loading up the box and taking away that round, like, it's going to be a lot of the weight's going to be put on Peters and Jones and Marcus Sales and whoever else comes up in the defensive backfield, right?
Yeah, and it's brilliant. That's a brilliant aspect of it, and great storyline having these two teams meet again for the second time in as many years. The 17th all-time playoff meeting between BC and Calgary. Let's bring in Farhan Lalji from TSN. Is back on the sidelines after some solid bullpen stints in the play-by-play booth. Farhan Lalji from TSN. We're going to talk about everything with him right here. And we've tracked him down in his home studio down there at the Lyndon, Washington compound. It is Farhan Lalji from TSN. He will be your sideline reporter this Saturday. Farhan, how are you?
I am good, bouncing back and forth between New West and Surrey and Lyndon on a daily basis. It's a good life.
Yeah, and you'll
Seattle
be
yesterday for the Seahawks game.
Yeah, the first place Seattle Seahawks. Who would have thought, eh?
Ahead of your San Francisco 49ers, Bakes. That's got to be tough to say.
Well, they got to take advantage of their game in hand this week. But yes, the Niners got their own issues, sadly, but still about 9 weeks to figure those out. But it just serves as a reminder, though, it is a great time of year for football specifically, right? I mean, we were talking before we hit record about the Washington Huskies and USC. There you go. He's pointing to the helmet for those watching this podcast.
It's not a Winnipeg helmet. It's a Washington Huskies helmet. Note the purple mask. It's not blue.
Way different, yes. But do you get geeked this time of year or what?
Oh yeah, and then there's that little hockey thing that sort of shows up in October as well that annoys us all. But yeah, truthfully, like it is the time, right? So for me, and I'm a big college football junkie, so I do get to cover that a little bit. But mainly for college football, for me, it's fandom. Whereas the CFL and the NFL is work. Although I love my work, let's not kid ourselves. So whether it's being on the sidelines on a NFL Sunday at a Seahawk game, or even better at a CFL playoff game at BC Place, it's an absolutely great time of year. And I was in Philly for the NFL game the other night when they had their Kelly green uniforms, and I've got some other travel assignments coming up, so including the college football playoffs. So it is absolutely the best time of the year.
Well, recording this on a Monday, barely 2 hours since we saw you here at practice. Just a walk through day zero officially, but what'd you learn? Anything stand out for you?
Yeah, just seeing Justin McInnis getting a lot of the offensive reps ahead of Lucky Whitehead was interesting, and not really a surprise that Smoke Mizell's back in the lineup. Hopefully, a rejuvenated and refreshed and recharged Smoke that is probably shown in the games that he's had an opportunity that he's maybe got a bit more explosiveness than, let's say, a guy like Jaquan Hardy, who's thicker and physical and can bring something else to the table. But I think for an indoor game against Calgary, I would probably look at a guy like Smoke, and I think that makes sense. And just seeing what's happening defensively, right, with Mike Jones, no surprise at corner, and Adrian Green, we knew he was going to get healthy this week, and waiting to see Sione Tuhema if he's working and practicing. He didn't necessarily today get any looks with the ones, but they've got to kind of figure out what they're doing on the appeal. So that was interesting. Saw a little bit of short yardage work. I won't give away any military secrets there, but that's good because this team has been really bad in that area, and they need help there. So hopefully they can get that resolved before the big game. But just playoff time, right? It's different. The guys feel different. There's a different level of energy. And this team's had good energy all year, but when it's playoffs and it could be the last one, you care.
Yeah, and short yardage was a focus on one of the shorter practice days last week, the bye week. So, yeah, they know that's we saw it. Winnipeg a few weeks ago could win or lose a game. So,
well,
hopefully,
go back to the first Winnipeg game, which on the surface was a blowout, but there was a critical point in there where the Lions had a 3rd and 1 to convert.
Yeah,
when the game was still manageable, and they didn't get it. And if they get it, and they can drive down and do something, then I'm not saying Winnipeg would lose that game, but certainly the margins could change a little bit, right? So it's something we take for granted. We see it in the U.S. with the tush push or the brotherly shove, and they don't do that up here. That's not legal, but it's got to be a play you can rely on. And I think when the Lions go out on those 3rd and shorts, they're holding their breath.
As far as this matchup on Saturday, Farhan, I at least go look and I read the press clippings and all that. I'm sure the players don't, but I'm hearing people say
do. You probably post them.
They're lying.
Probably post them.
But my question is, I've seen talk about Calgary, possibly some people saying Calgary should be the favorite in this game based off how Week 20 played out and based off all the recent results in these games. But do you still see BC as a considerable favorite in this game?
Favorite, not considerable, right? So number one, look, don't call me a homer because I've got my relationships with the Calgary coaching staff are every bit as close as they are with the BC Lions coaching staff. Love Dave Dickinson, Brent Monson, Mark Killam, and many others on that staff. Calgary's had one really good football game this season. They've had one really good football game this season that happened to be against BC Place. So who are they? Right? Certainly they're trending in the right direction, but a trend is a bunch of games. They've had one good football game this season, and they're getting healthy at the right time, and certainly that game will give them some confidence. But if you base it on a body of work over 18 games, the Lions should be the favorite. I'm not calling them the considerable favorite because I do think the Lions have kind of trended in a different direction from a team that was so explosive in the first half of the season to a team that, offensively, sometimes it doesn't flow as smoothly or as consistently over 60 minutes. And defensively, this team hasn't been as good in the second half of the season. When you look at their statistical numbers and the biggest metrics, total defense and scoring defense and rushing and passing defense and yards per play given up and second down conversions and some of these things, they're in the bottom third of the league since August 1st, right? So that's not just a little blip. That's something the Lions should be concerned with. But in terms of the completeness of their team and what they've shown over the course of an entire season, I'm sorry. You cannot tell me that one game where the Lions really only tried for one half is all of a sudden going to tip the scales to say Calgary should be a favorite. BC a favorite? Yep, considerable. Nope. Could Calgary come in here and take this? 3 weeks ago, we would have said absolutely not. Now you got to look at it and say, sure, they could.
When it comes to the game, too, there's some deja vu I'm feeling from last year where there's some talk about BC's run defense, and Calgary obviously went for 200 plus in the run game in week 20. Are they going to stick with that in your mind on Saturday?
I think they're going to have to, right? It's the same storyline it was a year ago, because a year ago, late in the season, these two teams played. Calgary ran all over BC. And I remember asking the questions, right, to Ryan Phillips at the same time of year that how are you guys going to stop the run? Because you haven't shown an ability to do it. And so they changed some things in their alignment and in their structure. You saw some of those looks again today. And Calgary just decided not to run the football. I don't get it, but they just felt that what the Lions were showing defensively, they didn't want to beat their head up against the wall. And it was a one-score game for the most part. You remember the Antonio Pipkin third down, chuck and duck and hope and pray, and it got answered, which kind of blew the game open a little bit. But it was a one-score game, and they just chose not to run the football and didn't really test BC. So I don't see that happening again. You've got Kadeem Carey, who's going to be healthy. Their line is slowly getting healthier, and they're going to try to run the football. And whatever BC does structure-wise this time, I just don't see Dave Dickinson immediately getting away from it. He's going to force BC to physically defend the run, not just structurally defend the run, and prove that they can physically hold up in the run game against Carey. I'm sure the Lions, like most teams in the league, would rather put the ball into Jake Mayer's hands. In that last game against BC, Jake should have thrown 2 pick sixes. Early in the year, those were going back for pick sixes. The breaks, the football gods were kind of helping him this time around, and it evened out and it didn't work. But imagine Gary Peters' house calls that. We're having a different conversation, right? So I think BC will prioritize taking away the run and putting the game in Jake Mayer's hands like most teams have done. And then Calgary will have to see what they do with that.
On the other side of that quarterback equation, for me, if we're talking about this Lions team prevailing in this game, we're going to be talking about Vernon Adams Jr. You talked to him again Monday, Farhan. Just your overall sense of where VA is at and his body of work this whole season.
Yeah, VA, as much as VA talks about himself in that, look, I know for us to have success, I need to have success. And that's true with any team. Quarterback's the most important position in sports. That's just the way it goes. However, I think where VA has the most confidence is in his coaching staff and in his offensive skill positions around him, right? I think there really is a genuine confidence there that Jordan's going to put him in the right positions to have success, and his guys are going to make plays for him. And if he can stay focused that way and not really let the part about being the quarterback and having it weigh him down, I think he's going to be just fine. Calgary was interesting in the last game in that they didn't bring pressure. It was 3 and 4 man pressure most of the game. Occasionally they would bring the Sam or the nickel, but for the most part, it was 4-man pressure. And, they got into those underneath zones that Vernon likes to hit quickly. So I'm curious to see how Jordan adjusts and what the game plan looks like, because, I do think that, he and Brent Monson, it's going to be a good chess match between two really, really highly regarded coordinators. And I think Vernon has the ability to navigate and see the right things and make the right decisions. So if BC doesn't turn it over, I think they can still be explosive, because there are some holes in that Calgary secondary that you can get to.
What about this receiving core? We've talked about Justin McInnis and the impact he could have in this game, and that was a guy they get him in free agency, and you went, okay, well, where is he going to slot in? Sure enough, injuries, he's played a role. I mean, who are you looking at in that position group to step up here?
Dom Rhymes and Keon Hatcher. So Hatcher, of course, didn't play in the game against Calgary. McInnis took his spot. McInnis was as productive in terms of overall catches, but he's not necessarily as explosive, right? Like sometimes Hatcher can turn some of those short gains into bigger gains. So, if Justin plays a little more than Lucky Whitehead, I think he can still be very productive in some of those spots. But Hatcher back. But, Dom Rhymes the last 3 games has been a little quieter, right? Had the one catch, I think, against Hamilton for 5 yards, but it was a touchdown. I think Rhymes needs to have a big game. It's his time, and definitely Hatcher as well.
When you're watching Calgary, you could be the smartest football mind around, or you could probably be watching your first CFL game and still notice that number 4 and number 57 on defense are everywhere around the field, and that's Mike Alway and Cam Judge. But when you're scheming up an offensive game plan, can you do stuff to avoid getting those players involved, or is that just more of a matter of VA being aware and the offensive line being aware of where those two are in the field at all times?
Yeah, you have to be aware. Absolutely. And Mike is not necessarily a big blitzer. Judge tends to bring a little more pressure from his looks. Micah trusts his instincts and just gets to the ball as fast as humanly possible. So I think the way to deal with a guy like Micah Alway is to use his aggressiveness against him, right? Whether it be in the play action game or whether it be, like looking over here and showing this and coming back away from it. I think he's so aggressive and he's so instinctive that you have to try to use that to work against him. But I don't know that there's anybody on the Lions offensive line that's going to easily be able to block either of those two guys. They play the game at a real high level. And in terms of a linebacker tandem, they're as good as any in the Canadian Football League.
Well said. We did have a couple of submissions when we promoted this on Instagram. Pick the best one here. A regular contributor, mbooth83 on Instagram, wants to know, should we expect to see BC loading up the box to focus on shutting down Calgary's run game? And will the Stamps again be dropping 8 or 9 to limit the passing game, something I think they did quite effectively a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, I think so. I think in both cases, right? I think that BC is going to have to bring one more person into the box. Now, one of the things Calgary did in that game, they took a page out of Winnipeg's book, and they played with an extra offensive lineman regularly. So if they do that, then BC is going to have to bring one more guy down into the box, right? And they've certainly got the linebacker flexibility to do that, but how much are they compromising themselves in terms of their pass defense, and what are they willing to take chances on, right? So, but yeah, you have to. You've got to attach players. You've got to make sure that you flow properly and that you've got every gap properly assigned. So I think you'll see BC do that. And as far as Calgary, yeah, I think that, Vernon Adams has had some of his most successful games against Calgary and Brent Monson. And Brent did something, out of character against Vernon in terms of dropping the number of guys in coverage. So I don't think he's going to do just that, right? Like, you do have to adjust and evolve, and he's got both in his package. So they're going to bring pressure from time to time, and they're going to drop more often than not, right? So Vernon's going to have to identify it quickly and trust his eyes, right? And he talks about that all the time. And just, when you get nervous with Vernon is when he double clutches, right? So can Brent Monson get him to double and sometimes triple clutch? If that happens, that's not a good thing for the Lions, right? So he's got to be able to, they've got to find ways to scheme his first look and his first read. And if they can do that, then I think they can stay consistent offensively and move the ball down the field. But, it is imperative that BC play from ahead. If they play from behind, I think there's going to be some problems.
What about the special teams? Because I know this was something last year at this time where people are saying it was quite distinctive advantage for Calgary. But this year, do you see that advantage for Calgary at all, or is it even, or where do you go there?
A bit more even. I think, Mike Benavides has done a really good job with BC special teams, especially their coverage teams, right? They've been 1,000 times better than they were last year. And when you look at Calgary, they haven't been as explosive in the return game, right? So Mark Killam is as good a special teams coordinator as there is in the league, does a great job, but that roster's been really, really young. And, what they've prioritized in the draft in recent years is not necessarily been special teams bodies. It's been guys that could potentially plug and play in other spots, right? So it's been young. So they struggled early on. They've now kind of managed to make a knot in the rope, and they're fine. They're not winning games for them, but earlier in the season, they were losing games for them. Terry Williams had like a 2-game stretch there, after the Ottawa game, where all of a sudden he was getting some things done, but in the last couple of games, it's been quiet again with the return game. So, for BC, don't take penalties in the return game, right? Just avoid the block in the back, right? Avoid the hold, just that little extra you want to do, don't do it. And just take what you get, and, just Terry Williams right now has shown he's only going to get what the return team gives him. And right now it's kind of been okay. So where the Lions and special teams have been good, their coverage teams have been good. Sean White's been incredible, but their return games have just been kind of meh. So, don't take penalties and you'll be okay. But then, to get back to your first question, that big advantage that we thought coming into last year, I think it should be a saw-off in this year's special teams matchup.
And while we have you still, Hamilton, Montreal to kick off this dance in the East, another rematch, exact same standings from a year ago. Funny how that works. But how do you look at this Eastern semifinal, Faron?
Well, the quarterback play in Hamilton, I talk about BC's kind of regression defensively in the last few months, and in Calgary, it's been one game, right? the most improved team in the league in the last 6 weeks of the season has been the Hamilton Ticats. I think they've shown some really, really good signs. James Butler's a bigger piece of that team. Their defense is slowly starting to come together. So I'm curious to see what happens at the quarterback position, right? Whether it's going to be Matthew Shills or Bo Levi Mitchell or both. But if they can get solid quarterback play, I think they're trending to do some good things here, right? And look, no, I'm not saying Montreal's not good, right? I mean, when you look at how much speed they have on the defensive side of the ball, I think they're a dangerous team. I think they've got some good pieces offensively with Philpott starting to, round into form along with Austin Mack and some of the other things they've found in the receiving corps. So I think it should be a really entertaining game. We haven't always said that about Eastern playoff games, but I think this one should be. But if Hamilton's quarterback play is what I think it is, like if it was me, I would start Matthew Shills, not going to lie. Knowing you could bring Bo off the bench and he could see the game and still be really good, I would. I love what I've seen from Matthew Shills in the last couple of games that he's played. I would take Hamilton in that game, but it'll be a really good one. It'll be a close one, much like the one's going to be here at BC Place.
I'll tell you what, I'm sure our guy Shinetti will be on the ground reporting all the quarterback reps in Hamilton. He does a fine job. You all do fine jobs. And I think we all agree that we love this time of year.
You almost had Claire here for sidelines. You were lobbying for that, weren't you?
I just, put some feelers out there. She thought she was coming. I don't know. I must have got her hopes up. I don't know. I'll tell you what.
I'm a
when
good
she
luck
showed,
charm except on play-by-play, because I had a good run of every time I did a Lions game they won, and then the Winnipeg Calgary games they lost. Right, so get me back on the sidelines, and I think you'll be in good shape.
Get back to your regular spot. What I was about to say was Claire's lone game here this year was the Ottawa comeback. So maybe that's.
Did she do that game?
Yeah.
Okay. I know she did the Saskatchewan game when I was away too.
Then Blake did the other two play-by-plays he did, right? So yeah, it started with Claire and then went to so Blake Price is winless. He's done. So all right, my friend, we'll see you this week.
Hey, one of these guys, you got to invite me when you guys go to the bar, right? I know Mo just kind of put me on the kibosh list for that, but season's not over yet.
Once you're on the Serbian no-fly list, it's hard. I know. Well, we'll be at the Shark Club Thursday night. If you're hanging out downtown Thursday night, I doubt it.
No, if you had the Shark Club out in Langley, I'd go. It's closer.
There you go. Langley, next time it's Langley, it's you. Deal.
All right. See you guys.
Thanks, bud. Always great catching up with the dean of CFL sideline reporters, I'll call him, Farhan Lalji. We'll be seeing him throughout the week. He's got the Western semifinal 3:30 Saturday on the sidelines, and a lot of great aspects to take from that. But I was interested in his thoughts on how it's going to be a coaching chess match. It's not something everyone talks about all the time, but yeah, Jordan Maximic done a great job play calling and play designing, really, these last couple of years. And Brett Monson in Calgary has developed himself into one of those top coordinators on the defense in this league. That's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, and obviously touched on the impact Mike Benavides has had on the Lions special teams this year, right? It seems like any new special teamer that hops in, whether it's Patrice Rene, Ryder Varga, obviously, but even guys like Jack Hinsberger that come in and immediately start making plays, sound gaps, all of that, right? So that's definitely been an important aspect of the Lions' success this season, right? Is improving that special teams play. And it's something that, playoff time, it's every game's a game 7, so you have to really unload your entire clip, right? And I don't know, whether it's whatever kind of plays you design up to just try and get that extra little edge is something that's all coaches, right? That have to do that.
It's the Lions and the Stampeders for the right to go to Winnipeg in the Western semifinals, Saturday, November 11th. That would be. Love the Saturdays, by the way. I know we've talked about it quite a bit. Another gentleman we'll be talking with this week. I have a hunch we'll see him at the walkthrough practices on Friday at BC Place. Mark Stephen, the longtime voice of the Calgary Stampeders, going on 30 years, I think. Great dedication to sports broadcasting in the Canadian Football League. And we're going to talk with Mark. What are the Stampeders thinking after, dare we say, backing into the playoffs? Doesn't matter. They're in 18 straight years. More on that with Mark right now. And off to Calgary we go now. A friend of the program, Mark Steven, voice of the Stampeders on QR77 radio. What is this, year 30 for you, Mark?
Not quite. Getting there, though. It's year 28.
Good on you. I know one of the great things about this league is the people who cover it, the broadcasters, and we're lucky to have some good ones here. Moj, Julio. We've had Rick Ball, J. Paul McConnell in the past. So
yeah, it's a lot of fun. I know all those guys well. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's funny. Let's start with that. You've called a lot of great Stampeders Lions games, playoff games. Obviously, the Calgary wins is probably the answer. But what stood out to you over that history of this rivalry?
Well, first, there have been a lot of games. And in many ways, the Lions have replaced kind of the Elks, Eskimos, as the chief playoff rival. Let's just be blunt about it. Edmonton has not been a particularly significant factor for much of the last recent years. So the Lions have stepped in. They've played an awful lot of playoff games in that time. They played Saskatchewan too, but it seems there's more Lion v Stampeder games than just about anything else over the last little while.
Well, we talked to you, and it's great history, no doubt, and who knows what chapter will be written here on Saturday. But talked to you a couple weeks ago, and we were saying, well, hope to see you in 2 weeks, might see you in 2 weeks, and here you are. Just your thoughts on how the way it transpired. Maybe they didn't get there the way they expected to get there, but the bottom line is Calgary into the dance for an 18th straight year. How rejuvenated is this team now?
Well, very much so. They've not been playing very well for much of the season. It was very erratic, and no team knows that better than the Lions, who saw the Stampeders at their worst in August, then their best just a couple of weeks ago when they played. But, 6-12 is not great. Let's not kid anybody here. But, and they also relied heavily on the generosity of the Saskatchewan Roughriders. But that's not the Stampeders' issue. They did what they had to do when they had to do it. They started to build momentum at the right time. So let's see how it plays out. But overall, it's not been a particularly satisfying regular season. Let's not kid anybody. The team is, in the playoffs, but only barely, with, one of the worst playoff qualifying records in a long, long time.
Yeah, and probably the most complete game they played all year was here at BC Place there on October 20th. How much do they take from that, Mark? How much of a template can that be for similar success?
Oh, I think a lot. I think that, like you say, they played really well. That's a game when all of the phases came together. They got the ground game going as it hadn't been running all year long. They got that going. They also threw out a new defense, a 3-4, that seemed to catch the Lions a little off guard till they finally figured it out. And I think one area that the team has really improved in, say, maybe in the month of October, is their coverage units. Williams is a tremendous returner, but he didn't really have that big of an impact on the game. And I credit the Stampeders' vastly improved cover units for really smothering him and other returners over the last few games here.
So when it comes to the playoff game last year, and this being the rematch of it, a lot of people were surprised that Calgary didn't put the ball more into Kadeem Carey's hands. And also Peyton Logan, but there's Tommy Stevens too as another X factor. This time around, do you think it's going to be a little different where those guys are seeing more touches?
Well, they've heard that comment a lot, I have to tell you, about what they didn't do in the playoff game. And you're right. Kadeem Carey's had a very challenging year in the sense that he's been on and mostly off the roster due to injury. So it's time to get it going. Dedrick Mills has played very well. Peyton Logan's going to be the returner. Tommy Lee Lewis is not going to come back for the game. So, yeah, I think it's time to get the ground game going, commit to it, and make it work, because you're right. It certainly was an object of concern last year that one of the premier backs in the league really didn't have a big role in the game the longer it went on.
With the receiving core too, if it is going to be Calgary doing damage through the air, like Reggie Begelton's obviously the number one guy, the team MOP nominee, but after Begelton, who do you see as maybe like an X factor to stepping up in that core?
Well, I would say that Trey Odoms-Dukes has been very effective as well. He's number 2 on the team, and he's got sort of an inside bruising type guy. He's done a lot of that. The one guy that can really take the top off as circumstances allow is Markin Michel. He's as fast as anybody in the league, and he's had some good success that way. And certainly it'll be really important for the Lions to get, at least for the Stampeders, to get McDaniel back against, getting back Reggie Begelton for that game. And, without him, the passing attack just doesn't seem to work. You have to put different guys in different spots. So he's certainly a big factor back in the game. The game last week against Winnipeg, well, didn't mean anything in the standings. The Stamps didn't execute very well. And that's a large part because of the absence of Begelton.
Could see how you would mention Marquay McDaniel by mistake there, Mark. Two very similar. Yeah,
I'll tell you what, it's not an accident because I just came back from a luncheon with a bunch of the Stampeder alumni, and somebody asked me, hey, remember how we won that game? It's when McDaniel got in behind everybody on one of the first plays of the game, and the Lions had to play catch up. They'd never played catch up all year, so that's
2012. You're talking about.
In my head.
Yeah, 2012 Western Final. I think you're talking about, right? Yes,
that's the one Kevin Glenn found him. So we're just talking about that barely a couple of hours ago, so it's in my head. That's why. So.
Yeah, the Kevin Glenn game that'll go down in lore. No doubt, 2012. Anyway, shifting back toward the present day, Jake Maier, I guess about a year and change since he was pretty much given the keys. How much has he developed over the last year or so? What have you learned about him?
Well, he's had some very good things that he's done, some not so good. He's right up there in the yardage leaders. He's moved the ball well. He has a high completion percentage. But his touchdown ratio is not great. The team this year seemed to find a brick wall established in any stadium at about the 20-yard line. That's why Rennie Paredes was battling White all year for the most field goals kicked in a season. So I guess on balance, I'd have to give him a passing grade, no pun intended. But I would say there's certainly room for improvement because, at the end of the line, he played every game and almost every snap, and nobody else did that in the league this year. And his stats are good, but I think they could be better. So I would, as I say, give him a passing grade, but there's work to be done and room to grow next year.
We've talked about the running game and the receivers and the passing game. Flipping it on the other side, pretty solid linebacker duo in Cam Judge and Micah Awe. We, of course, know Micah quite well from when he first broke into this league as one of those unknown Americans on the camp depth chart starting in 2017. And it turns out that guy's pretty good. But what do you look at this Stampeders defense and what they have to do in order to be successful?
Well, first you started out right. Micah Awe has been the centerpiece of the defense. He established a team record for tackles in a season. He was everywhere, but not too far behind was Cam Judge, who ironically leads the team in interceptions, but he too has been flying all over the place. They're two of the centerpieces of the Stampeders. Judge was signed in the offseason as a priority, but I think they got way more out of Micah Awe than they anticipated. They actually had Silas Stewart penciled in as the number one linebacker, but he battled turf toe just about all season long, only recently got on the roster, so it opened the door for Awe, and he stepped right in and did very well. The defensive line has been good at times, great at others. Inside, I think they got two of the best. Mike Rhodes with 11 sacks and Derek Wiggins, continual pest to other teams. So they've done very well. And Julian Hauser was a good pickup at one of the end spots. They certainly missed James Vaughters, who was the guy they signed in the offseason, only played 5 games. And the secondary, one thing that's working is they've actually started to stabilize it. They've had multiple injuries. In fact, you look on the 6-game list, there's a whole other secondary there. So it has been an issue, but it's stabilizing now, and I think is playing well.
Over here, we talk a lot about the Lions receivers and all the weapons where they're, Hatcher, Hollins, Rhymes, it goes on, right? Do you see Calgary's secondary now that you say that they're getting healthy? Do you see them up to the task of battling with those Lions receivers?
Well, they had better be, because I think it's a terrific group of receivers. I agree. Like Rhymes is as good as anybody. Hollins is good. Hatcher had a big season as well. So I think Katoy is just a bull in a china shop out there. He's amazing to watch as well. So they had better. It's a big physical crew, and I won't say they stopped them in the game because Hatcher didn't play a couple of weeks ago, but I think the Stampeders did quite well against them, and that'll be the big challenge to slow down some of those big, impressive receivers that they have.
I'll double up on the flip side here when I ask about an X factor in that backfield, because there's Trey Roberson still there. Maybe not once what he was when at his prime, but who do you see in that secondary kind of stepping up if the Calgary gets it done?
Well, one guy that's kind of come on down the stretch a little bit is Nick Taylor. He was a guy that Winnipeg let go in the offseason because of a serious injury, but he worked his way back, got into the rotation, then has moved in to be a starter. And he's an older player, but a lot of veteran leadership back there. He's had to play a couple of positions due to injuries. So I think he's an X factor. Is he absolutely the most gifted player on the team? Probably not, but his combination of experience, savvy, and intelligence makes him, I guess I would say, kind of an X factor back there. We'll see how they line up and who he's going to draw, but he's comfortable taking on any assignment. I mean, he's a little on the smaller side, but that doesn't seem to bother him too much.
Yeah, definitely a lot of great aspects of this matchup, but is there an area you look at, Mark, for, I guess, from a Calgary perspective that they must zero in on in order to be successful?
Well, do establish the ground game. That's one thing that we did talk about. Steer clear of penalties, which they've largely done. They've been pretty good at steering away from turnovers. They end up on the plus side of that by a pretty good margin there. They're going to have to establish the game and get ahead as well. They play better, as most teams do, with the lead. That's something they haven't done a lot of. Feature Reggie Begelton, who's really Mr. Second Down in the league when they need a second down conversion. So I think if they do those things and continue the strong play of the cover units, they'll give the Lions a handful for sure.
You've got me wanting to go down a 2012 rabbit hole now. Correct me if I'm wrong. Remember, Nick Lewis wasn't quite the same impact player at that stage for Calgary, but I do remember he recovered the onside kick at the end of that game. I think
that's right.
I do remember. Yeah. You were like in kindergarten back then. So.
Not at all. I'll drop a name. That was a Maurice Price game, right? Too. He had a big night.
Yep.
Yeah.
There you go. I know. My 2010s, I'm pretty good with CFL, but before that, I'm learning.
Because I remember we mentioned the McDaniel. There was a blown coverage in the Lions secondary, first or second play of the game. First play, yeah. And then, okay, here we go. But then Corey Banks had a pick six for the Lions. So it's like, okay, overcome that bad start. But it was just, Dave Dickinson called a great, that was his first year as OC, I think, right? So... yeah, he called a great game. I do remember that. And that just goes to show you that Lions team 13-5, arguably better than they were in 2011, but one game, anything can happen, right? So
well, that's just it. Through the years, the Stampeders have upset teams, but been upset. I mean, let's go back. 15-2-1 team lost the Grey Cup to an 8-9-1 Ottawa team. That wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
17, they lost to a 9-9 Argo team in the 2017 Grey Cup. But, they have created other upsets as well. In 2001, they followed the Lions lead of the year before and won the Grey Cup with an 8-10 record. So, it is one game, unlike hockey, where generally, because there's 7 cracks at it, the best team wins. It's not the case in football. And, going back to that 2012 game, I think the deciding factor was the Lions had been so good all year, they hadn't had to play very often from behind, and that was a bit of a challenge for them. So that's one of the things that won the game.
Yeah, and that whole other issue of not having much to play for a few weeks, right? Because I think they had clinched first place with 2 or 3 weeks to go for sure. So that's that old debate. I mean, it's a good position. It's a good problem to have, but the bottom line is come November, you're playing a team that's been in playoff mode that can be a disadvantage sometimes. But anyway, Mark, we're just thrilled to talk about another one of these with you. And I suppose we'll see you as early as Friday there at practice.
I'll be there Friday at BC Place, speaking to the Lions, getting the latest on what they do. And I think I'm going to have to change my driver's license. This is the 4th trip to Vancouver this year. Remember, preseason, 2 regular season, and this one as well. So,
well, it's
the way it works out. I don't think I've ever seen that, but so be it. That's the way it is, and no place I'd rather go than Vancouver. So.
Yeah, it's funny. Preseason, you sort of forget about after. But I was going through some photos. Yeah, the Lions wore the fog grays, and Calgary was in red. That like, oh yeah, I remember that.
Kieran Burnham walk-off field goal.
Kieran Burnham former Lion and Stampeder now, right? Yes.
Well, yeah, I put the preseason in the background pretty quick, so congratulations for pulling that out of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly what I'm saying. I forgot all about the gray uniforms and so. All right, my friend, have a good week, and we appreciate you joining.
Very much so, and really looking forward to it. I just love the atmosphere that's been created the last couple of years in Vancouver, and I anticipate a pretty noisy, passionate crowd, and that should make for a real fun afternoon.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark.
Mark Steven, love talking football with him, friend of the program, and 18 straight years in the playoffs, Nick, and that's something we enjoyed here. We had a 20-year streak going from 97 to 2016, 20 straight years in, and it's a reminder, though, cherish it while you can, because nothing lasts forever, and it looked like that Calgary streak was in trouble. 3-4 weeks ago, it was like, okay, Saskatchewan's magic number is 1 here to clinch third spot, but ultimately, you have to credit Calgary. They won a couple big games that they had to, including against the Lions and against the Riders the week before that. That really put the pressure on. So, love it. And first and now, we're here for a few more minutes. I've gone a little heavy this week. That was by design. It's a big week after all. We hope to do something similar 1 week from now.
And
Close. 1 week at a time, but 2 weeks from now. Wouldn't that be great? Let's close things off. Later this week, they're going to announce the division finalists for the Outstanding Player Awards, but we're going to talk about each Lions team winner that was announced and voted on last week, starting with Most Outstanding Player. Nick, this was a no-brainer. Vernon Adams Jr., CFL passing yards leader. You said it earlier. He would have had 6,000 probably if he stayed healthy. Nice feather in the cap for Vernon.
Yeah, incredibly deserving. It's a shame that it wasn't even higher production from Vernon, but definitely a deserving nominee for Most Outstanding Player. And then across the league too, the West, Brady Oliveira. That's what people was talking about. Not being Zach Collaros, but being Brady, the running back in Winnipeg for their team nominee. I mean, Larry Dean gets the nominee for Saskatchewan, a 35-year-old linebacker who has suffered several serious injuries and had to bounce back from that. Reggie Bagleton, who we talked about for Calgary. So, and then I think it's safe to say Chad Kelly's going to be the East representative for the East Division, but
just a hunch.
Yeah, and then I think for the West, it's Brady and Vernon both have good cases, right? I would say, and we'll see what happens, but
have a hunch it's going to be one of those two. Definitely both. Very deserving. Defensive and Canadian. We'll go quickly through these. I don't know if we have to list every one on every team, but focus on these Lions, of course. No surprise here. Matthew Betts gets the double dip. Defense and Canadian. Record-setting year in the sack department. Was a major force. Easily his best year as a pro. Led all the defensive linemen in tackles, I believe, with 21. Defense, I think Betts should have the inside track here. I know Micah Alway had a pretty good season in Calgary, and you mentioned Larry Dean earlier, but great honor for Betts.
Yeah, when you break records, I think it goes without saying that you should be the team's nominee, and it helps that he has a Canadian passport too, obviously being eligible to be the MOC as well, but yeah, for MODP, you got to like Betts to come out of the West, if not be the front runner entirely in the league. There's Darius Pickett's one name in Toronto that stands out, and then the Canadian, he has to go against Brady Oliveira again too. Cam Judge is Calgary's nominee. Stavros Katsantonis out in Hamilton in the East had a fantastic season. Marc-Antoine Dequoy, the other safety there. So, I think Betts should be at least the front runner for MODP.
Yep, have to think so. And again, we'll get these results later to midweek. Offensive lineman, Jarrell Broxton, left tackle's an important one. You're protecting the quarterback's blind side, and I think of the 4 times the Lions' offensive line had the weekly honor roll, I think every time Broxton was the highest graded individual lineman. So props to Jarrell here.
For sure, and I think you talk to the offensive line gurus around the CFL, they'll say, yeah, Broxton has been a star out west for the Lions and well deserving of the team nominee. Jamarcus Hardrick in Winnipeg is a name he's probably going to be going against to get the division nod. It was not Stanley Bryant this year, but Hardrick, the other veteran in Winnipeg, and then Dejon Allen's a name that I see people talking about all the time, and that's a Toronto's right tackle, about his play and how he's kind of maybe becoming almost a new Stanley Bryant in terms of being that kind of automatic nominee for his club. So more deserving candidates there.
Special teams, no-brainer from a Lion perspective. I know Terry Williams had a couple of big games. We talked about that with Farhan, but Sean White, 50 field goals and just clutch. Game-winning field goals, highest field goal percentage, I think, in the CFL. Just a clutch individual. There's going to be some stiff competition, even if Sean gets the nomination. Javon Leake in Toronto certainly has a case. I know Dandridge in Ottawa, Joseph Zima in Montreal, McAllister with Hamilton had a great year. All deserving guys, but I think it's safe to say Sean White and Javon Leake are on a collision course.
They better be.
Yeah.
Sean White, one of the greatest. I've seen chatter about White's season being one of the greatest all time when it comes to field goal kicking. And yeah, just the automatic 3 points whenever he heads out there, and an automatic 1 point when he goes out for a PAT. He's I think you would know by now, he's such a great, funny individual, but also someone who's also extremely dedicated to his craft. So awesome to see him get at least the team nomination, and I'm hoping he gets the league nomination too.
A player we've talked about on this podcast quite a bit for your Lions, linebacker / special teams demon, as Moj would say. Yeah. Ryder Varga gets the nod for most outstanding rookie. Some few exciting rookies this year. I mean, Taylor Powell in Hamilton, well, we know what he did. Dustin Crum in Ottawa, very, very impressive. And but I like Ryder Varga as the Lions' choice.
Yeah, definitely led the team in special teams tackles this season. And then, a lot of DBs for these rookies. Quantez Stiggers is a name in Toronto who it seems like down the stretch he was getting an interception every game and really elevated his play for the Argos. I think he's one of the youngest players in the entire CFL too, so he's definitely a name to watch. Reggie Stubblefield's a name that I kind of started discovering throughout the years. Montreal, Sam linebacker. And then you got a couple punters too, that's gotta love it in the CFL when a couple punters are nominated for some awards.
Yeah, punters, field position.
They're people too.
That's all important. Yeah, Flintoft will remind you. They're people too. All right, congratulations to all the award winners. As we wrap things up here, we covered a lot of ground today. This was great. BC Lions, Calgary Stampeders, rumblings that we might have an upper bowl announcement in the coming days, maybe by the time you've downloaded and listened to this podcast. So act now. Tickets moving fast. $30 for adults. 15 for kids 17 and under. Our backyard brunch, we're calling it, Saturday, gets going at noon. And get a load of this. You're going to have a food menu featuring the likes of sausage and egg sandwiches, buttermilk pancakes with blueberries and whipped cream and maple syrup. And I might have to skip breakfast and just do this. Pancakes, breakfast sandwiches, burgers, hot dogs. If lunch is your thing, it is brunch after all. $5 Coors Lights and other Molson Coors products on the menu. The party starts at 12, $6 mimosas, so it's going to be a party. Going to have some fun. Can't wait.
Yeah, the breakfast theme that's a classic. So many good
Brilliant.
options.
Yeah.
Mimosas too, I see there.
Yeah.
So anything you want, they got.
Yeah. Might have to go just hang out outside and blow off some of the pregame duties, but I can't do that. Maybe we'll have someone deliver it to us. Love it. Thank you to the listener, the fans. Love these great fans. Be sure to subscribe, rate, leave a review. First and Now, the official Lions podcast. Moj and Julio, 2:30 pregame on Saturday, AM 7:30. Reminder, BC Lions on tap hits the Shark Club, downtown Vancouver, just around the corner there from BC Place. We'll be there 8 o'clock on AM 730. Subscribe to the Lions Audio Network to get the BC Lions on Tap radio show to your podcast platform of choice. And we're fired up on First and Now. Thank you, Nikki.
Can't wait.